I realized I don't love leading a large team. Some people are so gifted at that. And, I like to think that I'm a great leader, but it's not what gets me excited, as far as dealing with HR issues on a day-to-day basis and some of the things you have to do when you've got a group that size.
Hey, what if your next business didn't require a storefront, didn't require a fryer, it didn't even require any prior experience? Well, my guest today is rewriting the playbook on what franchising can look like, and it's probably not what you think. Welcome back to The Root of All Success. I am the real Jason Duncan, and this episode is number 315. It's hard to believe that I've been doing this that long. It's a lot of fun, and the guest today is going to be a really good one. His name is Jon Ostenson. He's the founder and CEO of FranBridge Consulting. It's a top 1% franchise consultant. He's a multi-brand franchisee and a best-selling author of non-food franchising. And if you stick around to the end, you're going to get an opportunity to get a free copy of that book. So just stay around. He's going to tell you about that closer to the end of the show. He's built one of the fastest growing advisory firms in the franchise world, helping people break into business ownership without quitting their day jobs and without slinging burgers. So if you've ever thought about business ownership, but assumed that food was your only franchising path, think again. Jon's going to be here today in this show to explain why non-food franchising is exploding and how to get in intelligently. So, Jon, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jason, excited to be here.
So you've helped thousands of clients enter non-food franchising. So what's the biggest misconception that people have when they hear the word franchise?
Yeah, I think their minds go to fast food, right? It's all those chains that you typically think of, but there's a whole world of franchising that exists outside of food, and we've got nothing against the food guys. We need them, we support them, but my humble belief is there are easier ways to make money in these other industries that oftentimes require less capital investment, less operating hours, maybe fewer employees, and oftentimes they carry higher margins. And they're less susceptible to consumer whims. They're more understandable, need-based cash flowing businesses.
Yeah. Well, I know that when I think about franchising, that's typically what I think about is Subways or McDonald's or any of those fast foods. So I think franchising is much bigger. I've got a client that is part of my mastermind right now, and he's in the construction industry, and he was just yesterday talking on a coaching call about maybe potentially looking into franchising in the construction world. He said, there are opportunities. I know there's ServPro that does things like that. That is a franchise model. They're actually based right here in my area where I live. But you made a leap from a 15-year corporate career to franchising leadership at Shelf Genie. So what sparked that pivot, and how did you know that it was the right time to do that?
Yeah, no, very thankful for the corporate career that I had, and I know many of your listeners are in the same boat. But when I got into my mid 30s, I said, I really want to do something more entrepreneurial. Really started bugging me but I didn't know what that was, and really did not have franchising on my radar at the time. And was very blessed to kind of stumble into franchising. Had the opportunity to step in as president of Shelf Genie Franchise System, which is custom pull-out shelving for your kitchens and pantries, and stepped in and got to lead all of our franchisees across North America, all the home office teams that supported them. And that was really that pivotal experience for me where the light bulb went off. I said, this franchise model is really neat. You can see so many different backgrounds getting involved with a shared system, shared support, and become newly minted business owners. So long story short, I partnered with the founder of Shelf Genie. We eventually spun off. We invested in franchises ourselves on the franchisee side. So I've been on both sides of the table, and continue to have a portfolio of different franchise brands that I'm invested in. But I've got good people that run those now, and allows me to spend most of my time helping others do the same.
Well, as a multi-brand franchisee yourself, what have you learned by actually being in the trenches that most franchise consultants just simply can't relate to?
Yeah, I think so much of business. I mean, franchising is business. I mean, it comes down to the people, right? You've got to have a good franchisor on the sideline, a strong team there, but you also have to have a good operator in place that day to day. I mean, and I tell my clients this all the time. I won't sugarcoat it. It takes work, and if business ownership was easy, everyone would be a business owner. But it does take some extra work, but there are also the ability to achieve outside returns. And of course, with franchising, it just opens up the playbook from a tax standpoint. There's so many different tax strategies that you can employ, and you're building an asset that one day you can sell. But you're also building cash flows along the way. So I'd say being in the trenches, understanding, you're going to have a whole new set of challenges. There are things you have to solve that you haven't before. But what I've seen is having a good franchisor on the sideline, and they're not all created equal. I mean, that's just like any industry. You've got strong players that support you, and you've got ones that aren't as good. That's where we come in to help our clients. But if you have a strong franchisor and their support team, and you've got a group of other franchisees all across the country that are living the same thing day in, day out. It's that, you mentioned the mastermind. It's that idea of being able to exchange best practices and learnings to help shortcut that path to success.
You and I only met today, as we often do with new guests on the podcast. So we don't really know each other, and I'm sure you don't really know a lot about my background. But I run that mastermind that I was talking about, all on the premise of exit without exiting. How do you, which would normally be called absentee ownership, but that's not really what this is. It's a little different, to higher level. But you emphasize semi-absentee franchise models. So the question I've got for you about that is, how realistic is that promise?
Mhm.
And what makes someone a good candidate versus a risky one?
Yeah, a lot of franchises will market themselves as semi-absentee, semi-passive. Executive model is another term you hear. And the fact is, when you have a strong franchisor on the sidelines supporting you, it does make the model doable. But so much of the success comes down to having a good operator in place, like I was mentioning a minute ago. If you've got a good operator in place, it's very doable. Half of our clients start out with a manage the manager approach like that because the franchisor is carrying a lot of the burden for them from a daily support standpoint. But if you don't have the right manager in place running the day-to-day operations, it's going to create headaches and you're going to find yourself leaning in. So I always encourage clients as they go through the exploration process, to stay eyes wide open, because again, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. You're going to find yourself typically leaning in, especially in the early stages, until you have that right person in place. But with franchising, it does make that model doable.
Well, John, let's talk about risk. People assume that buying a franchise is safer than a startup, and I think I would even assume that. Like, as a matter of fact, I would. I've started 14 companies in my lifetime, and I promise you, I'm never starting another one. It's like I will never go through that hell again. I'm done. The next one I will buy. I don't know if it'll be a franchise, but it will be something I'm going to invest in. But what hidden dangers should first timers look out for when they buy a franchise?
Yeah, like any industry, again, you've got strong players that provide great support, and you've got others that wouldn't be good partners to get in bed with. And I think that end of the day, some of the things that we look for are, it starts with the people, having a good leadership team that has rich experience not only in the industry but also in the franchise world, that knows how to support successful franchisees. Obviously, the financial model's got to be there, competitive advantages versus competition. And then, what are current owners in the system saying about their experience? And so we've designed a process where our clients get to have these conversations. They get to go in eyes wide open. They get more information than oftentimes they can ever want prior to pulling the trigger. So again, nothing's ever a sure thing, but when you look at the actual results of franchising versus startups, there's really no comparison, just because you're able to go in eyes wide open. And again, you've got that shared support system.
So you wrote the book Non-Food Franchising, and you did that, I think, as I see, is to change minds. So what's the story or the stat from that book that tends to surprise readers the most?
Yeah, I would say, from a financial return standpoint, I think it's eye-opening to people when oftentimes they're thinking about their investment portfolio. Now, I personally invest in a number of different asset classes, very involved in real estate directly and indirectly, as well as other asset classes. To me, business ownership makes a lot of sense to have within the portfolio. And so I think that eye-opening stat to people in the book would just be what kind of returns can be generated through business ownership. Again, it's going to take a little more active participation than your other investments, but there's also that potential for outsized returns. And in the book, I talk about some of the tax advantages as well that go alongside that. So again, half of those that we work with are looking to jump in and run the business themselves day one. Maybe they're looking to leave a corporate job. The other half are putting a manager in place day one. And, again, you've got to cover their salary, but over time, you can really ramp that business up and get the tax advantages in addition to the cash flows.
So you've mentioned tax advantages a couple times. So I'm gonna dig under there a little bit. What give me a highlight of what that means.
Yeah, it just opens up the playbook. I mean, the government incentivizes business owners and real estate investors because they want to, those activities to take place. Business owners are creating jobs, and so the tax code is written in favor of them instead of the W-2. So, I mean, there are little things. Even, I pay my kids in my business. They can make 14,000 each year without having to be taxed on that. From there, I will. There's a number of things that they do, and they're young, but there's a list of things that the IRS ever asked me that I can point to. And from there, I can put 7,000 of that, each of their salaries, into a Roth IRA. You couldn't do that as a W-2, right? And so I get a deduction, they get earned income. That's been growing for several years now, continuing to do that. So that's just one small example. I mean, there's certainly things you can do, like a defined benefit plan, where you can, put a lot more than you typically are limited to in a 401k. So again, I'm not offering tax advice. I'm not a tax professional, but that's just a tip of the spear of some of the things that you're able to do working with your CPA.
So you've helped people invest in everything from waste removal to pet grooming. So what trends are you seeing right now in the non-food franchise sector that listeners should be paying attention to?
I joke that non-trendy is the new trendy. I mean, people, and oftentimes they want non-sexy. They want understandable cash flowing businesses that aren't going out of style. Everything from, you mentioned construction earlier, home and property services, so many different niches within that, from dumpsters to insulation to flooring to cabinets to pool cleaning. Again, things that people are going to be spending on. A lot of private equity getting involved there, a lot of smart money flowing in. Industries like health and wellness, categories like kids, pets, seniors. I'd say the general theme, again, is what are people going to spend on regardless of the economy? And that's where we see the money flowing.
Well, I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit, John, because as an entrepreneur myself, I'm interested in investing in things. I don't want a job. I'm not interested in that. It would definitely be absentee, manager managed, whatever, how you want to say it. So what are the top ones out there? Like, come on, give us a juicy one. What's popular right now that people are buying into and it's working?
Yeah, I'd say the most popular one this past year was in men's health, testosterone replacement therapy, as an example. And it's such a fragmented space, and it's becoming much more mainstream. But you don't have a big player out there. So, a business called Game Day Men's Health, really took the country by storm. Sold out in about 9 to 12 months, and we had multiple clients get involved that have done very well with that, and opening multiple locations. And it's been fun to kind of track with them. I'm personally invested in a business, just to give you kind of a contrast to that, the business that has asphalt paving and line striping. So we do parking lots. And so again, something that's not going out of style, you're always going to need that. But that's been a really popular space across the country. In-home senior care, we've had clients do very well there. I was talking with the franchisor CEO of a youth soccer program the other day, and he said, John, out of our 60 franchisees, looking at our top 10, 3 of them were Frambridge clients. Thank you for sending us such great folks. And so, again, that's just a taste of kind of the types of opportunities that you see people getting into.
So that's very interesting, especially the parking lot striping. That blows my mind that's actually, I think the testosterone thing even blows my mind more that that's a franchise thing, because that is such a medically like specific thing. So, but let me dive. I want to go one layer deeper on that. If someone said, "Hey, I've got 100 grand to invest," and I don't, the number really doesn't matter, but I'm just using 100 grand as an example, and I want to buy a franchise that I want to put people in to run day one. Like, out of what you see out there, what's a really good either industry or specific franchise? Like that one right now is pretty hot, and you could probably turn that into something pretty quickly.
Most people are leveraging using SBA loans. And so I'd say when you look at the all-in investment, franchise fee, startup cost, and several months of working capital, all built in, so your all-in investment, oftentimes you're in the, I'd say 200,000, 300,000 ballpark. That's very common. Some people are using all cash. Most are using an SBA loan and leveraging. Obviously, banks prefer lending to franchises, right, than startups. So if someone were to put in 100,000, they could probably leverage, and buy something up to 400,000. So um, again, it really opens up the playbook. I'd say we work with over 600 different franchise companies that are looking to expand, that still have good markets to expand into. They could probably get involved in about 75% of those with a $100,000 investment via leveraging an SBA loan. There's also ways, Jason, they can take an old 401k or IRA from a previous employer and roll that over through what's called the ROBS program, ROBS, and purchase the business with their retirement plan You have to set up as a C corporation. You pay yourself a salary. There's a few stipulations around it, but that's another common approach.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I may ask you after the show, like for some specifics, because I know you're trying to be politically sensitive because you represent so many. You don't want to put them at the top of the list. I understand that. Well, hey, let's take a quick break and thank our sponsor for today's episode, Constant Closer. If you are a course creator, you've got an email list of any kind that you're emailing people, you're probably leaving a lot of money on the table. And why do I say that? Well, because your audience has learned to ignore generic email blasts. I mean, I look at the open rates for my emails and I can see what they are, even though they're good. Like I see what's happening. Well, Constant Closer is an AI sales agent that sends personalized one-to-one emails to your subscribers and that are designed to convert, whether it's filled webinar seats that you're trying to get or booked sales calls. This isn't automation. It's artificial sales intelligence. And brands like Live Your Message and Ziggy Media, and they use Constant Closer to drive real results without hiring a sales team. I actually use them in my business as well. And if you're finally ready to monetize that list that you've built, I want you to go to therealjasonduncan.com/constant closer. That's therealjasonduncan.com/constant closer. Go right now. Check it out, sign up, see what it's like, tell them I sent you. Let's get back to the show. So, Jon, you've publicly shared that your consulting services are free to the buyer because you're paid by the franchises. So, how do you maintain trust when that model seems to be reverse incentivized?
Yeah, great question. You can think of me as a real estate broker, but for franchises. So it's the same model of real estate broker that you work with is going to get paid by the seller on the back end. And, we're very open about that, right? And so if someone goes directly to a franchise or if they go through us to that franchise, they're going to pay the same franchise fee. So it's just a sales and marketing cost for those brands. And it's pretty even across the board. So end of the day, our goal is to provide our clients with as much information as possible, whether it be through the FDD, the franchise disclosure document, can you talk to other existing franchisees in the system? Obviously the franchisor is going to provide a lot of information, but then I'm sharing a lot of my own experiences as I kind of hold their hand through the process, because end of the day, what gets me out of bed in the morning, that gets me excited, is clients being tremendously successful. They come back, they buy additional locations, they come back, they buy additional brands, they come back and refer their brother-in-law. And that's where I get the validation of what I do. So we're very open about the model, and I think it's pretty straightforward, very similar to real estate.
Franchising comes with a lot of contracts. You mentioned the FDD, franchise disclosure document. If people who are listening have never looked at one of those, they can be pretty intimidating because there's a lot of stuff in there because these are federally regulated. And I think it's interesting too when people say, "Well, I want to franchise my business," and I'm like, "Do you really?" Because there's a lot of stuff you got to do. It costs a lot of money just to set up a franchise. But what are some of the most common blind spots that investors miss when evaluating an FDD?
Yeah, and certainly once you get far down the road, I encourage you to have a franchise attorney review the agreement with you. We've got different ones so we can recommend. But they are pretty consistent. I'd say a lot of franchise documents are similar, and like you said, they renew these every year. They're regulated by the Federal Trade Commission, so it gives you some confidence going in. I mean, they've got to be audited, cross the T's, dot the I's. But I'd say understanding the why behind a lot of provisions within the FDD is important. So if you read it, it sounds like a one-sided document, right? From the franchisor's perspective. But understanding the why behind a lot of those provisions, oftentimes it's to protect you from other franchisees. So you've made this big investment, you've joined a franchise brand. You don't want other franchisees going rogue and hurting the brand and doing things that are outside the lines. And so a lot of it is protections for you at the end of the day. And it's really interesting within franchise systems. Oftentimes, resales, when you go to exit, you'll never even take it to the open market because another franchisee will buy it. So there's kind of that internal M&A that's very common. And within the FDD, there's some provisions around that, again, to kind of give you that path as well.
So this is called The Root of All Success. This is the name of the show. So Jon, you've been very successful. You got on the panel, the wall behind you, the Inc. 5000 award. Congratulations on that. So what is your one key that has unlocked success for you more than anything else?
Yeah, it's to figure out what you're good at and what you enjoy doing. And again, I spent many years in the corporate world and very grateful for the experience. Since then, I did have a company at one point where I had 40 employees, and we built it up with a partner. And I realized I don't love leading a large team. Some people are so gifted at that, and I like to think that I'm a great leader, but it's not what gets me excited. As far as dealing with HR issues on a day-to-day basis, and some of the things you have to do when you've got a group that size. What I love doing is evaluating new business models, and I love working with clients and being out there on the front end of things. So I've intentionally created my firm to be very streamlined and very client focused. Again, doing the things that I love doing on a day-to-day basis. So I'd say, Jason, the success we've had, it's been driven because of the passion that I have for what I do daily and helping our clients. I think it's really neat when you grow up and you realize what you're good at, what you enjoy doing, and also things maybe you're not, you don't enjoy doing as much.
How do you personally define success?
I think about life oftentimes through five domains, faith, family slash relationships, finances, fitness, and, really across the board there. And then, franchising would be my fifth F, or business, if you will. And so I'm constantly thinking about my time and how I'm contributing to each of those domains on a daily basis. And certainly some of those domains transcend into other ones. But I want to look back one day and know that I left nothing on the table, and I invested in the things that matter, faith, family, in the right order of priority. So, a lot of the things that I do as it pertains to business and around finances, I just got off with the wealth manager right before this. He said, "Gosh, Jon, I can't believe how you think about things. It's all very intentional, forward looking, with the goal of creating passive revenue streams and setting our family up so that we have the freedom to go to London in 2 weeks, for a couple of weeks, which is we're getting ready to do, or we just got back from a Nicaragua mission trip a few weeks ago. So I think having the freedom and the flexibility to do what I want to do in order of my priorities, that's how I would define success.
Well, based on that definition, do you consider yourself successful?
You know, I put a lot of pressure on myself, so I'd probably answer no, because I know what can be. But when I, here in my mid 40s, that you start to become a little more reflective. I think that midlife, not crisis, but that midlife evaluation is a real thing. So I've started looking backwards more, and I am very thankful. I think I've been given a lot, and to whom much is given, much is expected, is kind of my belief. So, I feel there has been a degree of success, and but I want to build on that and not ever rest on my laurels. And I think giving back is one way to. That's what success should entail.
All right. Well, I'm going to let you put your coach hat on, or consultant hat, as it were, and tell the listeners, what is your best piece of advice for entrepreneurs?
I'm a believer that activity breeds activity. And so I find that some would-be entrepreneurs, they consume a lot of content. They talk about entrepreneurship. They think about business ownership. And it's a one day, I'll get to that. They feel like they're in the game, but they're not in the game. They're on the sidelines. And so I always encourage people, like, take a step, like, really, you only live once, get out there. I mean, in my career, when I look back, oftentimes it was when I was moving towards option A or option B, that option C came out of left field. So I think you've got to put yourself in the game, quit sitting on the sidelines and just evaluating and overthinking things. Because when you're in motion, that's when doors start to open. That's when things start to happen. So in a nutshell, get off the couch and at least start moving in a direction. And that's when other things will find you.
All right. We're closing in on the end of the show today. I've got 4 rapid fire questions I'm going to shoot at you real quick. So, top of mind, answer these. Let's do it. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
All right. Favorite franchise brand you don't own yet?
Don't own yet. There's a recoat refinishing. It can be done in one day, recoating a hardwood floor. Incredible margins, small team required, very flexible business.
The city you think is most underrated for new franchise ownership?
So I live in Atlanta. It is a top 3 market, so I could not go with Atlanta. I think uh, Greenville, South Carolina, up and coming. I love those growth tertiary, secondary markets, if you will.
A mistake that you made in your first franchise experience?
Trust without verifying.
Amen. I think I can say the same thing. All right. And final one, a book that you always recommend to entrepreneurs.
God, there's so many of them outside of my own book. The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy is a great one. It's not rocket science, but it's a great reminder that the little things you do on a daily basis have a cumulative effect over time.
Wow. You know what? I've had people recommend lots of books before. That one is one I've never heard people recommend. I don't know anything about that book. I'm going to have to look that up. What's it called? The Compound Effect?
The Compound Effect. Yep. Darren Hardy, the author, was the head of Success Magazine for many years and has gotten to see a lot, and just really have a lot of respect for the way he thinks about it.
Interesting. All right. Well, on that note, let's talk about your book, because I told everybody at the top of the show that they're going to get an opportunity to get a free copy of your book and your book, Non-Food Franchising. So this is the time when you get to tell everybody about your book, how to get in touch with you. So I'll let you take it from here as we close things out.
Yeah, first off, come out to our website, franbridgeconsulting.com, F-R-A-N, bridgeconsulting.com. Share your email address. We'll send you links to the book. But the book, yeah, Non-Food Franchising, it's about 90 pages. I packed a ton of content in there just around franchising versus startups, franchising versus buying a business. How does franchising work? What are some of the industries? How to think about them? How to think about the financials and the legal side? And I give some case studies. So again, a lot of folks have read it by the time we actually get on the phone. So we'd love to share a downloadable copy, whether it be audio or PDF with you. Certainly, if you'd rather go out and buy it on Amazon, all proceeds go to Hope International, which is a great nonprofit that we support. And we're thankful we've sold thousands of copies, and so been able to support that organization. But yeah, again, Non-Food Franchising, you can find us at franbridgeconsulting.com. And if you'd like to take a next step, just indicate that when we reach out. And I'm happy to jump on a call with any of your listeners and help them think about next steps and if franchising can be a fit for them.
Well, Jon, thank you for being on the show today. You've been a great guest. I know the listeners won't experience what we experienced. We had a lot of technical difficulties to put this show together, but thank you for being here on the show today and pushing through. Thank you. And congratulations, by the way, on your success and what you're building there. And I appreciate your perspective. So again, thanks for being on the show today.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Well, you know what time it is. It's time for another edition of JD's Public Service Rants. This is the part of the show where I call out the little things that shouldn't have to be said, but clearly they do. So if you're guilty of this one, I want you to consider yourself officially put on notice. And this one is for you, you social media face holes. I call you face holes. I think everybody knows what I mean by that. Listen, just because you have a keyboard doesn't mean you have to use it. Here's kind of a rule. If you wouldn't say it to someone's face, don't type it out like some keyboard warrior with zero consequences. Social media isn't your personal burn book, and being a face hole online doesn't make you edgy. It just makes you an ass. So maybe, just maybe, think before you post. We really don't care what you think. Well, that's it for today's JD's Public Service Rant. If you've got an idea for one of these, send it over my way. I'll get some really good feedback on this. But remember, don't be that guy. Well, there you have it. That is another edition of The Root of All Success. I have been your host, the real Jason Duncan. My guest was Jon Ostenson. I'm really glad that he was here today on the show. President and CEO of FranBridge Consulting. Go check him out. He's got a free book that you can download, Non-Food Franchising. And I do this show, and I get entrepreneurs and athletes and entertainers and leaders and executives who've experienced success come share their perspective. And today, Jon shared a good perspective on that. So thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. If you haven't left a review or made a comment on the YouTube video, please do that. That encourages other people to take a look at this show and hear these stories of successful people like Jon. Again, thanks for listening. Make sure you tune in again next week when I talk with yet another very successful entrepreneur or leader or executive or athlete about their story of success. And until then, as always, I am the real Jason Duncan, and Jesus is King.
Attention business owners.
Attention business owners.
Feeling burnout from running your business? Uncertain if you're nearing burnout? Take our free 10-question business burnout test at businessburnouttest.com to discover where you stand. With just 10 quick questions, you'll learn how to immediately begin making changes to regain freedom and success. Cut your daily operations time in half. Improve your quality of life and prepare your business for your future exit without losing revenue or profit. Visit businessburnouttest.com now and take the test. Thank you for listening to another edition of The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, visit therootofallsuccess.com to access the show notes and other helpful resources. Follow Jason on social media at The Real Jason Duncan. See you again next time here on The Root of All Success.